The killer who played games with police. The phone rang at the San Francisco Chronicle on August 1, 1969, and the voice on the other end spoke with calm precision that chilled the reporter who answered. The caller claimed responsibility for the murders of 3 young people in Northern California and threatened to kill again unless his letter appeared on the front page of 3 major newspapers. Within hours, the Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald each received identical envelopes containing a letter signed with a symbol that would become infamous, a circle with a cross through it. The Zodiac Killer had announced himself to the world. The letter writer claimed responsibility for the murder of Darlene Ferrin and the attack on Michael Maggio at Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, providing details about the crime that only the killer could have known. He described the ammunition he used, the position of the victim's car, and specific details about the attack that had not been released to the public. The letter also referenced the December 1968 murder of teenagers Betty Lou Jensen and David Faraday at Lake Herman Road, establishing a pattern of attacks on young couples in isolated locations. Each letter contained 1/3 of a cryptographic cipher consisting of symbols, letters, and numbers arranged in a grid pattern. The killer demanded that all 3 newspapers print their portion of the cipher on their front pages, threatening to go on a killing spree if his demands weren't met. This wasn't simply a murderer seeking attention, but someone who had turned his crimes into an elaborate intellectual game. Within days of publication, amateur codebreakers Donald and Betty Harden cracked the first cipher, revealing a message that claimed killing people was more enjoyable than killing wild animals because humans represented the ultimate prey. However, the cipher provided no clues about the killer's identity. The killer's next confirmed attack occurred on September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa, where he approached college students Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, wearing a hooded costume with his zodiac symbol prominently displayed. After binding his victims and claiming he was an escaped convict, he stabbed both repeatedly. Shepard died from her wounds, but Hartnell survived to provide investigators with detailed descriptions of the attacker. Later that evening, the killer called police to report his own crime, speaking in the same calm, measured tone that witnesses remembered from his previous calls. 2 weeks later, taxi driver Paul Stein was shot and killed in San Francisco's Presidio Heights neighborhood. 3 teenagers witnessed the attack, watching as the killer calmly wiped down the taxi's interior before cutting away a piece of Stein's bloody shirt. The witnesses provided detailed descriptions to police dispatchers, but a communication error resulted in patrol officers looking for a black male suspect rather than the white male the teenagers had actually seen. The killer sent another letter to the Chronicle 3 days later, including a piece of Stein's shirt as proof of his involvement and threatening to attack schoolchildren. Law enforcement agencies launched one of the most extensive investigations in California criminal history, interviewing thousands of witnesses and examining hundreds of potential suspects. Despite thousands of pages of investigative material, physical evidence has not yielded a definitive match. Composite sketches based on witness descriptions varied significantly, showing suspects with different facial features, ages, and builds. The killer continued sending letters and ciphers to newspapers for several years, with some messages containing additional cryptographic puzzles. The ciphers and copycat letters suggested someone who enjoyed intellectual games. Whether or not they were a trained cryptographer remains unproven. Some ciphers were eventually solved by amateur teams decades later, but none produced a credible identification for the killer. What made the Zodiac case particularly disturbing was the killer's obvious enjoyment of media attention and public fear. His letters revealed someone who took pleasure in manipulating law enforcement and terrorizing the general public through psychological warfare. He used letters and puzzles to extend terror beyond his crimes, transforming murder into a public, unsolvable performance. The killer understood how mass media worked and exploited newspaper coverage to amplify his reign of terror far beyond his actual victim count. The Zodiac Killer achieved exactly what he appeared to want: lasting notoriety that transcended his actual crimes while maintaining complete anonymity. He proved that in the modern age, a clever predator could use media attention to become more famous than his victims, turning murder into entertainment for a fascinated public. His case established a template that future killers would follow, showing how violence could be transformed into spectacle.